Hi everyone, hopefully you can see my slides, you can hear me okay. And thank you for joining my session today on what is DevSecOps, and hopefully I can give a bit more context around this new buzzword within DevOps and the interaction with security and the benefits around that, and also how we look at best practice and how we implement that and how we do it well. Today's agenda, so I'll give an introduction briefly around Flow Health as a company in case anyone has missed any of the earlier sessions with the staff from Flow Health. I will talk about what is DevSecOps at a high level, how do we implement DevSecOps, why is DevSecOps important, and how do we know that it works well. So Flow Health, the world's first AI-powered super app for women's health and lifelong well-being. An introduction around myself and my experience. So for the past decade, I've worked across banking, fintech, e-commerce and startups, all building technology risk and security functions. Previously, I was a CISO at Zonal Retail Data Systems. They are one of the biggest SaaS providers for hospitality in the UK and Europe. I was fortunate enough to build an award-winning security function in my 4 years at the company. I scaled security from one person up to a multifunctional team to cope with over 100,000 cyber attacks a day across our 30 SaaS products that covered web, app, and platform. More recently joined Flow in the past 3 months, and I'm on a mission to make Flow Health one of the most secure apps in the world. So what is DevSecOps? Here is an overview of the DevOps lifecycle, and effectively DevSecOps is the additional layer of security throughout the DevOps lifecycle. The goal of DevSecOps is to promote the fast development of secure code base. Security is involved in every stage of DevOps as outlined below. And some of the key areas, everyone always asks me where DevSecOps and everything meets together, is ultimately automation. In stage 3 that you can see there through the verification, SAST and DAST, which effectively is security tools based around static and dynamic analysis. So static analysis scans secure code and binaries, and the dynamic analysis scans interface of running the application. I won't go through all of these different layers, but as you can see, this is where security effectively comes into play within the DevOps lifecycle. And a bit more context around that, as I said, automation is key, and through that, automating security, so core security controls and processes should be automated early in the DevOps workflow. The major buzzword at the moment is shift left, and ultimately, it's about starting security in the development lifecycle rather than retrospectively after pre-production or before the product release. So you're trying to capture any vulnerability within the code base before you deploy it. And again, looking at reducing any false positives within the CI/CD pipeline that would add a delay to the development lifecycle and stop anything being released within production. And again, the final stage of that is scaling SecDevOps and enabling security champions, which are people who you empower within your development teams or work streams, who can validate security, whether that's through automation, manual inspection, or being upskilled to a level where they understand what vulnerabilities look like within your code base. And again, that really helps with assisting towards working with development teams, testers, and architects to accomplish their goals. So how do we implement DevSecOps? Initially, a good path would be to incorporate automated code scanning, pen testing, which is penetration testing, and malware checking and vulnerability scanning into development lifecycle. From here, you can scale up and start integrating security into more layers of the existing processes. The end goal of DevSecOps is to bring about better quality of code, reduce vulnerabilities of apps, and better security. More recently, I was on an online event, and they estimated there was 60 billion Java and Scala vulnerabilities. which is massive. And again, that's just down to, I'm a firm believer that because of companies want to release more quicker, then things get missed from a security point of view or checking your code base to make sure that it's secure. So the key areas here in the diagram, as I've spoken about with STAST and DAST, is effectively fit within your CI/CD pipeline. And again, checking and having those peer reviews before build and test and any check-in within your respective environments. So roles and responsibilities, I think it's quite important to understand where everything comes together within that working relationship. And DevSecOps bridges that gap by going one step further and integrating security measures into the development process. This enables early and continuous risk management within a collaborative framework of DevOps. Security becomes a shared responsibility that is integrated from end to end. So within the development, the operations and security, I think in recent years, these three areas probably butt heads and don't always agree around security management or continuous risk management and ultimately looking at where your vulnerabilities are pre and post deployment. So what are the roles in DevSecOps and how does this play out with mobile app development? So mobile apps probably pose the most risk within security, especially multiple releases on a daily basis, depending how your company operates. So again, there is an emphasis on DevOps automation and security. So looking at these problems, automating it, taking the responsibility away from people having to think. So if you use STAST and DAST tooling, which I'll talk about in the next couple of slides, that definitely helps reduce the overhead of stopping your release process, stopping your implementation plans, and ultimately impacting features and requirements that you may have with your current dev pipeline. So within this, in terms of the roles, this includes configuration management, composition analysis, and selected approved images or containers, etc. And again, it minimizes the weakness of IT and business operations, where sometimes these domains or areas tend to have conflicts. So DevSecOps is bridging that, especially within a fast-paced environment that releases multiple times a day around mobile apps. And again, a high degree of security can be achieved by this collaboration and people understanding their roles and responsibilities. So the ultimate goal of DevOps and DevSecOps is to increase the company's ability to create and deliver quality software within the shortest time possible. With the DevSecOps approach, you aren't waiting for final stages of the SDLC to introduce security. Every stage of software development will incorporate security. So it's vital and important that security vulnerabilities are found before they are released. We're seeing a massive increase of cyber attacks, script kiddies, malicious entities that will look to expose, whether it be through the mobile API, web platforms, to ultimately either breach data or compromise your systems. So I think it's very important that DevSecOps is adopted more so than ever, and especially when you can automate quite a lot of the heavy lifting and the verification of anything that may be resulting in a vulnerability. Here's an example of some tooling for your CI/CD pipeline. So SAST and DAST. We currently use Sneak, which I'll touch upon how you implement that in my next slide. We use Sonar Cloud, Sonar Cube, and many different verification steps there that may help you. This is just, again, generalist tools across code, manage, store, build, and deploy streams. And I don't know if you may have adopted these within your organization and company, but yeah, just some hints and tips there that may help to help orchestrate that. And there's many different videos on YouTube that can help you implement this. I think it's relatively easy to implement these within the CI/CD pipeline. So again, I've touched upon Sneak. This is our implementation map with Sneak, which is something that we capture on a monthly basis, roughly about 3,000 critical vulnerabilities, and we stop them being released and deployed. And also, I think about the same number for high level vulnerabilities. And again, it's about fix well developing, and looking at what happens when you merge your code. Something like Sneak can help create Jira tickets within the workflows. So as soon as something's found, then again, it can be tested, fixed, and monitored. And again, you can create automatic fixes that can certainly help, or indicators that can tell you where you're going wrong within your code base. As I mentioned before, Java and Scala seem to be the biggest areas where that's where all the software vulnerabilities are at the moment. And again, it helps you with your build, and it shows you where you are within your CI/CD pipeline. There is security gates, so you can either automatically approve or decline anything through release. And again, you get different alerting, different reporting across all your different environments, and it shows you where your vulnerabilities are. You can also gamify it. So if you have many different teams, you can see who is doing well from a vulnerability management point of view before you release into live and production. So why is DevSecOps important? Before I go through this slide, for me, it's very important because if you're working in a high or fast-paced environment, and you deal with regulations and potential scrutiny from regulators or entities that want to verify what you're doing, whether that be any investment companies within that are helping like a startup. It's very, very important that you have a decent level of validation around your code base and your product. I know everyone's trying to get to market as quickly as possible and scale companies, but ultimately it's very, very important that you don't introduce a high level of risk, because that could impact your investment. You could get scrutiny from your end user, and ultimately the regulator could impose fines. So why is DevSecOps important? Embed security into the SDLC earlier and on purpose. And when companies code with security in mind from the outset, it's easier and less costly to catch and fix vulnerabilities before they go too far into production or after release. And I think it's important you capture them first time round, instead of something being found by your security team or an external company that conducts penetration testing and then goes back into your pipeline and then creates more duplication of work, and then you need to validate all of that as well. Companies in multiple industries, as I've listed below, can implement DevSecOps to break down silos between development, security, and operations, so they can release more secure software faster. And I've listed different industries there and different regulatory requirements like HIPAA, PCI DSS compliance. And again, these are things where regulators and external bodies will definitely look to scrutinize a company, and DevSecOps really helps speed up the security process, and again helps with things like if you build IoT devices, if you're dealing with credit card information, I think it's very, very important that you're validating who has access to your data, and ultimately what happens when you're building a product, mobile platform, web, and ultimately how you validate if it's secure before release. I don't know if anyone has heard of the OWASP Top 10. Effectively is a collection across web, mobile, and platform, which is ultimately the top 10 risks for each respective domain I've just mentioned there. And within mobile, I'm putting such an emphasis on mobile because probably the vast majority of attendees, all the sessions over the next 2 days, the company will be involved in building mobile. We live off mobiles. Our entire life is controlled over a mobile, and here are 10 things that you should definitely look out for and test. OWASP is a great organization, Open Web Application Security Project, which basically tells you what are all the bad things out there and ultimately how do you fix them. So the OWASP Top 10 PDF, just Google that, will show you the top 10 things from mobile and web and ultimately how do you fix them. So some key ones here is improper platform usage, insecure data storage, whether that be backend or in your cloud services, insecure communication. So what do your APIs look like? How do they communicate? Do they hard code, encryption keys, encoding passwords? Are they being transferred over API calls? And again, insecure authentication. So if you don't have things like 2FA, MFA, cryptography, if if you don't use randomized encryption tokens between your API calls. I have seen in the past where massive services use API calls and use the same encryption key for every single user. So if you decompile the API, you have the encryption key, and you can capture effectively the sessions and communication or the post requests, and then manipulate the values to access that session. Insecure authorization. So your end user, are you validating them? Are you recording their IP address, their mobile device, and have they authenticated to say that they are who they are, and everything else. So code tampering and reverse engineering. So decompiling, an Android app and manipulating anything from that point of view that can help relay a call back to a back-end database or a platform service. So yeah, many different things there to look at and be aware of. So how do we know that it works well? Ultimately, how do we measure success? A reduction in tech debt and security vulnerabilities being reported within the SDLC. That's been very evident here at Flow Health. We have made great strides in the past year with Sneak within our CI/CD pipeline. That means that security can scale with our development teams, and we can work in a collaborative effort. And as I mentioned before, we've gamified that. We're also introducing some rewards and bonuses over the next couple of months to further incentivize people and get more of a competition between each other as well. It can also reduce security bottlenecks. So if you automate the process, that means that security don't come and hassle everyone and stop you doing what you're doing and effectively getting in the way of progress. And that's not security's job. Security's job is to help advise the business, educate and scale, but with your development teams and product teams and everything else. There's no need to wait for a development cycle to finish before running security checks. So again, that can be a continuous process. I think we can scan most of our code base in a relatively quick time, and that really helps instead of doing a manual investigation or an internal penetration test where we need to stop services or replicate environments to then test them and everything else. So Devsecops provides managers with a holistic overview of such measures, thus providing a better framework for easier compliance. So yeah, depending on what industry your company works in, again, financial services, so you'll have a lot of regulatory scrutiny, and again, that's just an example. Devsecops definitely provides an overview of the key teams, so dev, ops and security, and how they work together and how they quantify the measures around how many vulnerabilities are being found, how many of these can be fixed, and ultimately what are themes that are recurrent issues that you're finding, so then you can better educate people, and then look at things like SQL injection, cross-site scripting and anything else around items that I've just listed from the OWASP top 10. Better security intelligence and decision making across the development lifecycle. So I think DevSecOps definitely helps understand the value of collaboration. It quantifies how many vulnerabilities. It can look at themes and trends and ultimately help you adjust your automation within security and rule out any false positives as well. And final point, DevSecOps is becoming the fastest approach to dealing with security in companies. Some would say the shift left is inevitable, and it's something that we have adopted. I think we're about 75–80% there in full adoption, and I think that's excellent given that security is relatively new at Flow. It's only a year old. It's in its second iteration, and it's something that is of great value to us as a company. We can quantify it, we can show return on investment, and our development teams are very happy with the adoption because it means there's more automation and we can do security quicker and we can grow with our development teams. So yeah, that was a quick whirlwind around my slide. I'm conscious of time and wanted to give people an opportunity to ask any questions within the Q&A. If anyone has any questions, by all means, please ask. I know that seems a lot easier than just a PowerPoint slide there, but ultimately DevSecOps is the future. If you scale at pace and you deploy multiple times a day, it's definitely something you need to consider to help you. So again, it stops impacting if something comes back after it's been released. It definitely helps reduce the long-term agony and long-term pain, and also reduces your vulnerabilities and makes people like myself, our lives a lot easier. It means that we can focus on other things like training, education, and looking for open source tooling or anything that can really help our developers to do their job more effective and to educate them better. So yeah, I will have a drink of water and let anyone ask me any questions. Failing that, I think there is a Q&A session with the wider Flow Health speakers, I believe in the next 20 minutes. So if no one has any questions, I'll wait a couple of minutes, then I will. Oh, here we go, Frederick. Any good practice for incorporating DevSecOps into existing processes in your org? I think if you have DevOps already within your organization, that's half the battle, because effectively you are just introducing tools that will automate and scan the code base within the CI/CD pipeline. Again, hopefully we can share these slides after the sessions today, whether it be on our Flow Health LinkedIn page, Frederick. So hopefully that would help. A really good book I would recommend is called DevSecOps, and it's by Glenn Wilson. We recently had Glenn Wilson as a guest speaker within Flow, and it was really great to understand how you can merge and how you can introduce DevSecOps. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question. So John, 2 questions. How do you implement policy enforcement across your SDLC? So again, you would automate that within your CI/CD pipeline. So you would impose the stage gates or check gates. And again, the sneak guide is really helpful, and that definitely helps in terms of policy. So if you're reading an actual logical policy, so again, you would create stage gates before releases, depending on how your organization works, and or you use a traditional policy, which is a document which would detail and outline the steps of the various different checks that must be done. So when you're writing your code base, validate, you would scan a tool against it, so something like Sonar type or Sneak, and then look at the different stages. If you have a pass or a fail, then that would determine your decision tree and where you go next. So your second part also, what would you do with regards to license obligations as open source libraries bring in license obligations? Traditionally, you would limit that to, again, depending on how many developers you have in your company. Again, you would have probably your lead developers, and you would cascade the license to those guys. And they would be the kind of final validation point before you release into production. And then you would record that, because you don't want to give it to 300 people, then some company reaches out and says, oh, you're using 300 licenses when you should be only using 10. So we've seen that in the past as well, and we keep a check on our licenses and and validate everything that's been used for that. So hopefully that answers your question, John. But again, something like OWASP Zap is free. That's something that can really help in terms of validating aspects of code and things like API calls and stuff like that as well. Marton, how do you see frameworks developing to offer as close security by design future direction? Again, I think your framework would be, at the core of it would be a complete adoption of automation. So everyone would need to agree that what are the standards within your own framework. So who controls the different environments, whether that be test, production, your CI/CD pipeline, who validates it, how do you introduce SAST and DAST tooling, and how do you look at things like privacy by design or security by design? Is ultimately, it needs to be across your entire organization. It can't be, the message is from bottom up. It needs to come from top down, the executives, every single person And thankfully, very lucky at Flow, where security and privacy features in every aspect of our products, even where they're being built, the conception of them through product management, project management, that is considered at every single stage. And again, that comes through to having a good SDLC policy, everybody understanding through training, what your roles and responsibilities are within your organization, and ultimately keeping it high level and not bombarding people with a 60-page document, a traditional framework. But again, outlining a holistic view of, here are 10 stages or 5 stages, depending on how you want to do it. And ultimately, where do you check and validate within your organization before you deploy software. So hopefully that answers it. Ryan Mantis, my apologies for pronunciation of your name. What books do you recommend on DevSecOps topic? I just mentioned earlier Glenn Wilson. You can buy his book on Amazon. Glenn, you can follow Glenn Wilson on LinkedIn, Twitter, everywhere else. His book is excellent. It's probably the most detailed, comprehensive. It's very friendly to read, has all the frameworks, lots of great imagery that can help people visualize the life cycle and SDLC, and where you should be inputting your tools, where you should be getting the collaborative effort and understanding roles and responsibilities. So yeah, I mentioned earlier that we had Glenn as a guest speaker. We did our first external meetup, which was, I believe, a lot of audience from Lithuania. And we also had him internally speaking about the benefits and the adoption of DevSecOps and how that is a progression of DevOps. And ultimately, it comes down to automating and taking responsibility away from people. So if you have 80% of the time a tool automates and scans and tells you if you have a pass or fail, that's half the battle, I think. And a lot of people kind of get scared with the shift left. And again, when ultimately it saves you so much time, it stops your security team complaining, it stops people arguing. And again, you'll start to see a bit more of a collaborative effort around, if you clearly define who owns the code, who owns the environments, and the benefits of security, automation, and the tooling, that definitely helps. So hopefully that answers your questions. But again, any of the guys in the Q&A, if you have any other questions or I didn't answer it or you need some clarity, please ask. Also think there's maybe a bit of a lag as well, questions. But thank you again for asking. It's good to know that I'm not the only person on the session. I'll just scroll down, just bear with me. Oh, we have Frederick again. Do you have any experience using evil user stories with hacking? If so, how did it go? Great question, Frederick. And I need to be very careful with my NDAs with previous companies. But ultimately, yes, I worked for a company where we had a brand new product that the product team decided to release. Early hours of the morning. This was an order pay app, which ultimately meant you went to go reserve a table or went to an establishment where you wanted to order food, and so someone could use the app. But ultimately, we found that someone was able to manipulate the voucher queries within the app. So if you wanted, say you had a promotion to get 10% discount, so someone was able to relay the query string, ultimately using basically the same encryption key for the platform services, which should be changed every time. So they'd noticed that they could change the post and get response to manipulate the values at the back-end database. So they could, instead of getting 10%, they could get 100%, 200% discount and stuff like that. So again, it's about kind of input validation as well, so people can't manipulate aspects of, that are already embedded within the app, and also anything that comes back from a platform, so that they don't manipulate the query string, and basically the response and changing that response and telling the back-end database that instead of 10% that you're getting 100%. That's probably, but we've had many many excellent stories throughout my career. I've worked in companies where staff have built Bitcoin mining rigs and didn't think they would be detected, or used Tor browsers and the Tor nodes would flag on the infrastructure scans. So yeah. But again, a lot of this is understanding what you're building, making sure that you're proud and happy with the security of it, because it's not a blame culture or a blame environment. I think it's very important that people understand why security is important, and why we do what we do, because ultimately, if a company's hacked or breached, that could result in job losses, multi-million-dollar fines, and loss of confidence from a regulator or your end user. And ultimately, you want to build the best product. You want to, at the end of the day, be very happy with what you've built and you've released, and that's something that DevSecOps really helps. So hopefully that's kind of given you a bit of insight. But yeah. Oh, excellent. Thanks for sharing that, Frederick. Yeah, DevSecOps by Glenn Wilson, as mentioned. I'm just scrolling down to see if there's anything else. Again, I'll open this up. Has anyone implemented DevSecOps in their organization? How did they find that? Have you found any challenges? Is there any sticking points? As I said before, Flow Health, we're about 75% there. The tool sets are there. We're scanning. We're further expanding that within the various different work streams, and we're looking to improve that constantly, fine tune it, make it easier, reduce false positives, and then ultimately our role at Flow is to support our development teams and give them the knowledge, the tools that they need, and to make their life easier, because ultimately that makes security's life easier, because it's less things for us to investigate, or means that we can sleep better at night as well. So again, I'll open that up to anyone who, if you have implemented that in your company, what experiences do you have? Have you found any issues or problems? Yeah, I'm conscious there's only 12 minutes left of the session as well, so it would be good to get some feedback from other people and how they've adopted that within their organization, or any challenges that they've found. And I'll also just add, I am on LinkedIn. If anyone would like to add me, have a conversation offline, or talk about how collaborating and sharing ideas, best practice, I'm very open to that. And again, for anyone who has missed my name, I am Leo Cunningham. So again, I think I'm probably the only one on LinkedIn with that name. So yeah, if anyone would like to reach out and speak about best practice and adoption. So Harold, let me just read your question. I find tooling a problem, especially if the trial period is 2 weeks instead of setting a limited amount of resources, 10 max free. So people are often very concerned about metrics as well. So Harold, I would potentially speak with the vendor directly and see if you can get some licenses for like a 30-day period. So that then gives you more time. I think Sneak have released I believe an aspect of their product for free. So I think that's probably a great starting point. In no way am I endorsing or working for Sneak, but we've just had an excellent experience with them. We renewed recently. We're very happy with them, and we can scan our entire code base and environments very, very quickly. I won't give those numbers away, but it's light speed. So yeah, I think there's many different STAS and DAS tooling out there, but ultimately if you go to the vendor directly, or you source the account manager on LinkedIn, they will be more than happy, I think, most of the time, because they will see a potential sale from this. And again, hopefully that the tool that you pick has a good dashboard, can indicate the environments that have been scanned and tested. Also look at any control gates or pass or failure ratios. So again, I would reach out to the vendor directly, or the account manager, or a salesperson who might be able to give you an extended period. like a month, and then maybe ask them if they have a report around what you've just done in your environment, because typically it's an agent base, so they should be able to relay that information back to you. But again, great point. People are often concerned about the metrics. It depends on what you're trying to look at. Ultimately, if you're using a tool to scan vulnerabilities, it should be how many do you find, how critical are they, and what's the cost to the business if these are exposed. I think that's very important. So if I am selling the concept of security in a company, we need to understand what is the risk, what's the actual financial impact if that was to be exposed, the likelihood, and again, things like potential for data breaches. If you find a critical vulnerability, the likelihood of that will be probably exposed, because script kiddies are on the rise. As I mentioned before, there's many different people who just want to test the boundaries of a product. An end user who's using a product who is curious and may look to obviously expose that. But again, things like validation of code. So how many lines of code have been scanned? How vulnerable is it? And ultimately, will that stop the release because it's found 1 million criticals, or 2 million highs? So ultimately that will determine your metrics around what you find and what you do with it. Hopefully, Harold, that may have answered your question. I'm just conscious of time, and I don't want to waffle too much either. Yeah. And as I mentioned before, I think there is a wider Flow Health Q&A session, I believe, in about 10 minutes time as well. So anything that we miss here, you can speak more with our CTO and other people from our product streams, and they'll be able to give you more context around what we do from a development point of view. So if you not really want to focus on security, then there's other things around, how we release, how many releases we have on a daily basis, and what we do from a strategic point of view, given that we are an industry leader within fintech in regards to what we do, and we're a very unique product as well. Just looking through the chat. No more new questions. I just keep thinking about John's question around policy enforcement and stage gates, or blockers that you have, whether it be manual validation, so depending on your production line and who validates that, whether it's manual or you automate it or you put a blocker within your CI/CD pipeline or SDLC. So I'll maybe give it another minute. If there's no other questions, then I'll jump off. I'll end the session and get ready for the next one. Hopefully that was useful today. Again, I know it's a bit of a whirlwind explanation, but I don't think there's many people covering DevSecOps at the sessions over the next 2 days. And again, I'd like to thank everyone for their questions. Hopefully I answered them. If I haven't, or you'd like more context, then please bring them up in the next Q&A session, or reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, and it would be great to have a chat, a Zoom call, whatever it may be. And again, thank you for your time, everyone. I am going to end the session. Again, hopefully that was insightful, maybe give you a bit more of an overview, some hints and tips, and a holistic approach, and a bit more insight around Flow Health as a company and what we're doing from a security point of view. And we currently also have a couple of roles within the security team. So yeah, we're looking for a cloud security engineer, AWS focused, and also DevSecOps engineer. So if you know of anyone, we're opening these up across across Europe, and I think we'll probably be covering that as well. So yeah, that's a great point, John. License obligations are great to also access, as it would be a pain to go through it manually, absolutely. Or if you've got someone validating how many licenses are being used, that definitely helps, because you don't want those costs to creep up as well, because Devsecops helps reduce costs as well. So yeah, so anyway, I'm going to go, guys. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your questions. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.